Meet the Mazda CX-80, which is about the same size as the CX-60, only this one offers 3 rows of seats. Now, it's not to be confused with the CX-70, which is actually bigger than the CX-80. In fact, it's the same size as the CX-90, but that one only has 5 seats. Confused? Well, that makes 2 of us, but the truth is, Mazda's large premium SUV range now does require a little bit of explaining, so bear with me. But the short version is this. This is like a replacement for the CX-8 and CX-9, offering 7 seats, plenty of space, and the choice of a diesel, petrol, or plug-in hybrid powertrain. But do you want one? Stick around while we find out.
Okay, so there are 10 different prices you can pay for a CX-80, with the cost spanning more than 30 grand between the cheapest and the most expensive models. Now that is a lot to get through, so the short version is that only the petrol-powered model has an entry-level pure grade, which is just under 55 grand. Everything else goes Touring, GT, and then Azami, and all start from almost 62 grand and up. The petrol-powered Pure opens proceedings with a highlight list that includes 18-inch alloy wheels, a 10.25-inch central screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a 7-inch driver display, 3-zone climate control and LED lighting. But you also get cloth seats with manual controls, both of which feel a little low rent. The Touring is probably the bang for bucks pick, which adds a second 12.3-inch screen for the driver, leather seats that are heated up front, sunshades, an auto-opening boot, and wireless charging. The GT gets 20-inch alloys, adaptive headlights, body-coloured wheel arches and cladding, electric adjustment for the steering wheel, heated second-row window seats, a hands-free auto boot, a panoramic sunroof, and a 12-speaker Bose stereo. Finally, Azami cars get a different 20-inch alloy wheel, Nappa leather seats which are now ventilated up front, some extra styling and safety kit, and some other niceties too. It's also worth pointing out that the CX-90 currently has a special drive-away offer of around 73 grand for the petrol-powered Touring. But even with that deal, it does feel like a big jump from one 7-seater to the other.
Now, it's true that the Mazda CX-0 range, so like the 60, 70, 80, and 90, have come into some criticism for looking, well, a little similar. And it's also true that it does take a sharp eye to immediately tell those models apart, but it's also only really a problem if you don't like the design. And I gotta say, I think the CX-80 is a bit of a looker, especially up the front here, where this kind of sharply pointed front end and the blacked out grille, I think work really nicely. Where the design does start to fall over a little bit, in my opinion, is here over the rear axle, where it just looks like function over form has really won the day here to make all that room in the third row for passengers, but then it is a 7-seat SUV and you are looking for room back there.
Inside, it's a pretty familiar cabin experience, and if I'm honest, it's not a place that feels that much more premium than a high-grade CX-5, especially in the cheaper models. And some of the switchgear looks a little familiar from cars lower down the Mazda pecking order too. Still, it is a pretty premium and comfortable feeling space, and it all feels like quality stuff, and it's satisfyingly solid. The CX-80 is a big boat, stretching almost 5 meters in length, almost 2 meters in width, and just over 1.7 meters in height, and it rides on a wheelbase of more than 3 meters. Each trim weighs in excess of 2 tons, and it will tow between 2 tons and 2.5 tons braked. Those dimensions translate to solid interior space, despite this not being Mazda's biggest SUV. Middle row room was ample for my 175cm height, and things are strong even in the third row.
So Mazda makes a big deal about the third row of the CX-80 being genuinely adult size, saying it's easy to get into and comfortable once you're there, so we thought we'd put it to the test. It starts with this super wide opening rear door, so there's plenty of room. You fold the seat down, it slides forward, there's a little step up, and it is relatively easy to climb into the third row. Now, once here, you'll find with the seating in that position, there is tons of space back here. As you can see, I've got plenty of knee room, plenty of headroom. I can even rest my arm with little cup holders here. You can genuinely travel back here in something approaching comfort. Now, as I mentioned, there are cup holders on either side, as well as USB charging ports and little air vents too to keep things cool back here.
At the boot, you'll find 258 litres with all 3 rows in place, 566 litres in 5-seat mode, and a massive 1,971 litres with the 2 rear rows folded. You can have one of 3 flavours in the CX-80, with the cheapest being a 3.3 litre 6-cylinder turbo petrol, producing 209 kilowatts and 450 newton meters. There's also a 3.3 litre 6-cylinder turbo diesel, making 187 kilowatts and 550 newton meters. Both are equipped with a 48-volt mild hybrid system to marginally reduce fuel use. Finally, there's a plug-in hybrid powertrain that pairs a 2.5 litre petrol with an electric motor for a total 241 kilowatts and 500 newton meters. Mazda reckons the petrol engine will sip 8.4 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle, while the diesel drops the claim figure to 5.2 litres. The PHEV claims 2.7 litres per 100 kilometres combined, but those numbers, as they are with all PHEVs, are really nonsense in the real world. Still, the PHEV will deliver a driving range of 65 kilometres in all-electric mode, and it'll take some 90 minutes to recharge its 17.8 kilowatt-hour battery via AC charging.
Welcome to the driver's seat of the CX-80, and this is the petrol one, but I want to talk a little bit about the diesel before we move on to this. Look, I know big diesel engines are a little bit on the nose at the moment, but equally I know that, gee, it's a nice engine in this. It has so much torque, so much poke, and it just smoothly moves a vehicle this size along. It's a perfect fit, and for mine, it is the pick of the powertrains. I really like it. I also like the way the diesel rides better too. Now, they tell me there's no major suspension tune or hardware changes between petrol, diesel and plug-in hybrid, but I think perhaps it's just the added weight of the diesel. Whatever it is, it just seems to ride a little bit smoother, to iron out some of the road bumps a little bit better, and it's just a little bit more comfortable than this one. Now, that's not to say that the petrol powered car or the plug-in hybrid is uncomfortable. In fact, Mazda came into some criticism for the ride in their CX-60. They've made some moves to address that, both with cars that are already on the ground in Australia and in upcoming models. But this one does iron out a lot of those kinks. It rides really nicely on smooth roads. Yes, it can feel a little harsh and unsettled over bigger bumps where it doesn't iron those out with total aplomb, but on regular road surfaces, it is a smooth and comfortable drive. But we have picked up just a couple of small quirks on our journey so far. And the first of which is there seems to be just a tiny bit of hesitation in the gearbox occasionally. It's almost like it wants to drop down a gear, but doesn't. So it creates like a little shudder through the car. It doesn't happen very often, but it definitely happens. But the other quirk I think is interesting is we've driven the CX-80 and the CX-70 almost back to back. And the CX-70 for mine just has a nicer, more refined, smoother ride quality than this one. I'm not sure if they've tried to make this one feel a little bit more sporty, and so it's a bit firmer and a tiny bit harsher in places. But equally, I don't know how many people want a really sporty 7-seat family SUV either. Now, when we tested the plug-in hybrid, I got to say the battery level was at 0, so I can't really give you an accurate feel for how that one goes on road when both power sources are fully charged up and ready to go. But I can tell you that both of these 6 cylinders, the petrol and the diesel, are really kind of refreshing in a world of ever-shrinking engines. I know they're probably not the most politically correct engine choices around, but it's also really nice to have plenty of power underfoot when you put your foot down, no matter which powertrain you choose. So with all of that in mind, I guess the biggest question I have about the CX-80 is, what does it mean for the CX-90? I know that it's bigger and it's presented as more of a flagship, but there's plenty of space in this one and it's significantly cheaper. So if you are shopping for a 7-seat SUV from Mazda, might I suggest you drive both, because I think you might find the CX-80 does everything you need it to.
There's no official ANCAP rating, but you can expect Mazda to be targeting 5 stars. Standard equipment includes things like AEB, front and rear cross traffic alert, and a 360-degree monitor. CX-80 is covered by Mazda's 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, but servicing can be a little disappointing. Service intervals are just 10,000 kilometres or 12 months for the diesel, and owning one will cost you $3,299 over the first 5 years in scheduled servicing. The petrol gives you 15,000 kilometre intervals, but your costs increase to $3,469 over the 5 years. The PHEV is actually the best of the lot, pairing 15,000 kilometre intervals with a total 5-year cost of $2,676.
Yes, it does take a little while to wrap your head around this new naming convention, but once you do, you'll find the CX-80 is a very competent, mostly comfortable and premium feeling family SUV. Now remember, we've just scratched the surface here, so for the full review on this car and on all of its rivals, make sure you check out carsguide.com.au.